Hello and welcome. We're back with another edition of Sree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. It's been a few weeks, but we have a great guest that was well worth the wait. Brian Stelter, author and journalist, currently with Vanity Fair, formerly with CNN Reliable Sources and the New York Times. We are so thrilled to have him on our show this week. Our host, of course, is Sree, and my name is Neil Parekh. I am the executive producer and guest host of the show. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. Please like, please comment, please share, retweet, tell your friends. This is going to be a great show. Let us know where you're watching from. We are thrilled to have Brian on the show. I wanted to have him on the show for several years, but of course, he had his own Sunday morning show and couldn't join us. But he is now, as I mentioned, at Vanity Fair. He's also with the Shorenstein Center at Harvard's Kennedy School. And he very graciously offered to join us this Sunday morning. I'm going to bring on our host, Sree Srinivasan, and we will welcome him. Sree, good to see you. How are you today?
Thrilled to be here on a Sunday morning. I thought, it's hard to get people up and ready for things, but Brian has a young family, so they're already awake, and the house is already buzzing there. So thank you to Brian for being with us. Thank you all. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and on digimentors.group. Please tell your friends, just retweet or tag someone who could find this conversation interesting and useful, and they can watch us live, or as soon as we're off the air, it'll come on all those platforms. So tell your friends, please. I see Jonathan's watching from the East Village. Thank you, Jonathan. We love your presence every week. And Naomi is here. Good morning from foggy Upper West Side. And Diane Stefani is here. So many great people. Folks, tell your friends this is going to be awesome. Retweet. I know Brian's going to retweet this right now so that his audience can join us as well. And I've told the New York Times Alumni Association and all of those good folks. So this is going to be lots of fun. And I'm excited to go through the paper with Brian and then talk to him about all the things that are happening in his life. He's had a busy year, and we're going to hear all of that very shortly.
So, Sree, you're going to walk us through the paper, but we're going to bring Brian on in the very beginning so that we can walk through the paper with him. So let's go ahead and have Brian join us. Brian?
Hello.
We're so thrilled to have you here. Thank you so much. I want to let folks know that, we get guests in all sorts of ways, from recommendations, from people reaching out. But I actually walked up to Brian at a reception at South by Southwest in Austin about a month ago. He walked into the dinner, and I reacquainted myself because he spoke at a conference that we had organized. Sree has known him for years. And it was a simple, Brian, nice to meet you. You know Sree Srinivasan. I work with him on this Sunday show, the New York Times Read Along. Would you be a guest? And before I even knew what was happening, he had his phone out looking at his calendar, looking for dates. So thank you, Brian. Really appreciate it. Appreciated that.
Well, as you mentioned, I used to be unable to do this because of my Reliable Sources program on CNN. So now that I'm a free agent, let's roll.
Absolutely.
The problem is I don't have a print copy of the paper. I can't find one.
You don't need one.
Yeah,
You're going to read it to me, right?
Yes,
exactly.
We're going to read it together. I want to point out that David K. Johnston, the great David K. Johnston, amazing reporter, journalist, is on the show. He's been a guest with us, and he says great guest. So there you go, Brian. That's a compliment to you.
I'll try to live up to it.
Yeah, Ken's watching from wet, cool East Central Iowa. And I have to say hi to Neil's mom, who's always watching, and she has upgraded you. Very good guest. And Patricia's watching from New York. So
she doesn't say that for everyone, Brian. I'm just letting you know. She usually just says hi to me, but you get a very good guest. So
yes, and Brian, I've got to show you where I live now. After we moved after 30 years on the Upper West Side, so we're near the UN.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, wow. You can see the East River. You can see a little bit of Long Island City. And then this is a example of how things change so quickly. That's Cornell Tech, the campus of
Yes.
the university right there on Roosevelt Island. And I met someone who the other day did not know that Cornell had a real campus for centuries in Ithaca, New York. This person thought this was the main Cornell campus, and
In the
that
river.
is
Yeah.
part of our conversation. You have documented how the world changes, how the media changes, and I just wanted to point that out to you. I also have a copy of your previous book now because you're going to tell us about some of the things that you're working on, and this did pretty well, didn't it?
I don't want to brag, but yes, there were so many books about Trump, right? And when I wrote Hoax, the only book that was left to write, I thought, was about Fox because, the only angle that still needed to be explored was how he was manipulated by TV and also how he manipulated TV and how that twisted relationship basically ruined his presidency. So that was Hoax. We sold like 150,000 copies. So I'm doing another one, Network of Lies, that's about what's happening now with the trial. We can get all that later.
Yeah, we want to hear all your thoughts on all of those things. And one of the things that I've experienced every time you've retweeted anything I've sent or posted anything is the trolls come out. And I experienced it in a very tiny way. This morning already, people are upset at me for hosting you. And I can't imagine, Brian, going through every day when you were on CNN that at an order of magnitude, right? I'm just a tiny sliver of your presence or your online experience, and 100 times, 1,000 times that. How did you get through it?
Well, first of all, I don't view myself as a victim of it. I'm aware of the volume of craziness that's out there. I also am aware that I had colleagues at CNN that would get it a lot worse than me.
How is that possible? I don't know how it's possible.
I hear it. I mean, look, how do I explain it? Like when I got fired, and I've embraced the F word. It makes me happy. I'm drinking from my reliable sources mug. Actually, you know what this is? This is my reliable sources daily coffee mug. This was the CNN Plus show that was streaming, and CNN Plus was only alive for like 4 weeks. So the coffee mugs did not arrive until after the network was canceled. So I'm upstairs one day that last summer, and one of the engineers says to me, "Hey, your mugs finally arrived." And I said, "What mugs?" And they had this entire box of these fantastic reliable sources daily mugs that were for a dead show on a dead network. So this is now my tribute to CNN Plus. That it's my best coffee mug around the house. But when I was fired from CNN, a couple of weeks later, I was at the county fair with my daughter, and we were going around on the Ferris wheel, and I get an email from a fact checker, and I made the mistake of looking at my phone when I'm on the Ferris wheel. I should have been in the moment enjoying it with my daughter, but I get this weird email that pops up, and it's from a fact checker, and it says, "Hey, there's this article going around on Facebook that says you've been arrested by a military tribunal." And this fact checker, thankfully, is trying to find out if it's true, right? And, of course, it was a made up article accusing me of horrible crimes and implying that's why I was out at CNN. And, 2 weeks later, the same fact checker emailed me again and said, "Now they say you've been found guilty and sentenced to death." And thankfully, the Pentagon denied it. But then 2 weeks later, the same person emails me and says, the same website now claims you've been executed at Guantanamo Bay. And to me, that's hilarious. Like, to me, that is hilarious. And I didn't know how to fact check whether I was alive, right? Like, what do they want to do? Come over and take my pulse? Like, to me, that is just a symptom of the sickness of our society, that there are some people that for some reason want to believe really, really crazy things. But I have to try to take a step back from it and realize they're not really talking about me. They're talking about like a cartoon character. They're talking about a caricature they've created of something they want to have exist, right? It's not actually me. And so that's how I think about trolling. They're not actually bullying and harassing me. they are taking out their own rage and resentment on this cartoon character that they've created with the help of their friends at Fox. That's the way I try to think about it. Maybe that's not a healthy way. Maybe it is a healthy way. I don't know. But it's mostly the way I handle it. Now, the one exception to that is when something is literally threatening and, it's got to be pursued through the legal system. And I've got to say, I think, I know that there are many people who have been let down by the courts and the justice system in this regard. I had a very good experience, however, with SDNY, with the system in Lower Manhattan. The government prosecuted a case against a man who was harassing and threatening myself and Don Lemon and others. Don and I testified in court when it was time for the sentencing. And my takeaway from that was, most of the time the trolling stuff is nuts and it's just a cartoon character. When it actually is a crime, then we need the system to work the way it works, right? And prosecute and have accountability. And so I was thankful to the feds in that case for doing that. Now, I know that's a really long answer, but that's the way that I approach it. Is most of the time it's just noise. But, once in a while when it reaches the point of a crime, then, you hope that the authorities step in.
Well, we wish you the very best in how you handle this and everything else that comes your way. David,
listen, it's because I'm in the arena, right? I'm talking about Fox News. They have, it's when I announced the new book, Fox put out a statement making fun of me. It's like, that is the world. And all I can do is try to navigate it. You know what I did when they put out a nasty statement on Thursday? My reaction was, I'm just a reporter. I cover you guys. This is what I do. It's my job. As long as I keep going back to that basic thing, which is I'm just trying to report, I think that's hopefully the way to go.
It is. And look at David's note. I want one of those mugs, please, for my collection of shows. Glad to pay for it and for shipping.
I'll look in the basement and see if I might have some left. I'll look in the basement and see.
All right. Folks, we're talking to Brian Stelter on a Sunday morning. This is sadly not reliable sources, but he's got so many great things coming up and we're going to hear all about it. Please tag a friend, tell them about this. Anybody who cares about news, newspapers, journalism, the fight against disinformation and misinformation should be watching this. And we're going to just go over the paper very quickly. This is the print paper. He doesn't have it at his home right now, but I'm just going to flip through this and listen for Brian's thoughts as we go through. We'll go to the front section at the end, but we'll start here with Metropolitan, which, as you know, Brian, the section that only runs in the tri-state area. The lead story: with new eyes, a cold case is reopened. Detective Robert Klein was methodical and lucky in his quest to solve Jasmine Porter's 1996 murder. Punching Through the Hidden and the Haunting, an opera at the Met, explores the life and tragic career of gay prizefighter Emile Griffith. Just jump in anytime something catches your eye. And you, of course, worked at the New York Times before you were on CNN, and you were covering the media. So I don't know if you did those early stories that people would do predicting the end of the newspaper. And of course, we have seen newspapers die across the country, but this particular paper and many others are still with us.
And thank goodness for that.
Yeah, this is Lucinda Williams reflects on her age as a renegade and poet, and how much for out of this world. The cost of children's birthday parties for the wealthy have spiraled in Los Angeles. So
I love that story. Yeah.
As a parent of young children, what is the state of the birthday party?
Thank goodness both my kids are summer birthdays. So all we have to do is a pool party, maybe spend $300 at the ice cream truck show up. But man, that story was amazing about these parties in Brentwood where they're renting these $1 million castles. It was sick.
Oh.
When I was at the Times, one of my goals was to write for every section. And as I'm looking at all these, I'm realizing I never got in the book review. I think I missed one.
But I'm sure your book
got reviewed in it, but I wanted to write for it.
Yes, of course.
I now have another goal to add to my list of places to write for, because I think I got almost every section when I was there, because Metropolitan didn't exist yet, but well, then we were lots of times people listening. You've inspired me.
Available.
So now I got to try to review a book.
Yeah,
What's in Arts and Leisure?
Yeah, Arts and Leisure. Welcome to the pod, people. Behind the scenes of the red hot reality show Love is Blind. I've never heard of it. Brian probably has.
Love is Blind. Come on, so we got to watch Love is Blind.
What is it?
It's I mean, Jamie and I were only addicted to it for about a week, and then we fell out of it. But you know, it's geez,
All right.
now I'm blanking on what
All right, we'll come back to it. But you know, addicted for a week sounds weak.
That's true. That's true. But it's
All
it's the one where they don't know each other. Well, anyway, I'll have to Google it.
But hasn't there been like 90-day fiance and things like that before too? All right, here we go.
Right. It's because they don't get to meet until they get married. Like they talk,
Okay.
they talk, they don't meet. So thus they're blind. Does it work out or not is the name. Okay, sorry.
No, and you know, coming from India, that's traditionally how for centuries marriages happened. You know, they got to meet maybe, but the real, you know, they didn't really connect till after the wedding. Okay, Sunday Business, which you wrote a lot for. What won't people buy in a bid for the past? This is a Rocky. I guess it's a DVD. Yes, collectors of pop culture memorabilia find their childhood has a price and it's going up. This set of a Rocky, there's not a DVD, it's a VHS tape of Rocky. A set of 3 Rocky films fetched $53,000 in February. Maybe I shouldn't have thrown out my collection of VHS tapes.
I just found all my old VHS tapes in my mom's basement, like Titanic and Godzilla, and I hadn't thrown them out yet, but now I'm wondering what's
now that your kids, you know, future is
value.
secure, you can they will be able to sell.
We'd have to find a VHS
player.
machine, a VCR.
Announcing the end of faking it in Silicon Valley. Signs that playing fast and loose with the truth as consequences. Of course, this could be an ode to Mr. Musk. But you know, as you know, Brian, there was an element of you got to kind of fake it till you make it. What are your thoughts on that?
I read Erin's column online. I thought it was super smart because she's going through, you know, Sam Bankman-Fried and FT, you know, the recent meltdowns and the sentences. You know, there's, you know, not just that case, but cases I had not heard about that had gone through federal court. You know, people arrested for falsifying data and all of that. You know, what my gut tells me is there's always somebody out there doing that, even as others are held accountable. So, you know, you could probably write that story anytime, but, you know, I think she's capturing the mood of the moment in a way that's real.
Yep. Sunday opinion cover, America, China, and a crisis of trust. A trip to Beijing and Taiwan showed me how the US and China are fated to cooperate and doomed to compete, by Tom Friedman. That should be a fascinating piece. I'm actually flying to China this weekend, next weekend coming up. And it's the UN World Data Summit is in Hangzhou, which is near Shanghai. In 100 years, what cultural moments will be inextricably associated with the pandemic? What are a couple of things that occur to you? To me, I would think of the word PPE and the horse dewormer. What are some of the things that would occur to you as not just cultural moments, but what are the artifacts of the pandemic in your mind?
It's such a good question. I wish I had a great one off the top of my head.
I would say the masking would be a big thing. People would remember that.
It's one of my disappointments that, I mean, look, this is on the list of pandemic disappointments. This one's pretty low, but it frustrated me that there were not actually more television event, cultural moment type things that we felt like we could all watch at the same time. I would have liked to think that if I was the head of a broadcast network in March of 2020, I would have put on a live nightly show, like a variety show. Now, of course, hard to do that with the production restraints of sheltering in place and distance, but like it's actually the case that there was nothing we kind of all watched together. We all watched the news, but we all watched different channels, and so there. I want to read that article. I want to see what things they think. Or is that an article or just a question? Oh no, it is.
But I think it's a whole article in there. So we'll look at it.
Okay, we'll get there.
But look at this. Maureen Dowd is writing your story that you've been talking about for 15 years. She's writing it today. Fox News is not a news organization.
You know, it's complicated, right? I could spend an hour dissecting that one. Yeah. Her point, as she writes, quote, "It's not it's a greedy business that freaked out when some Fox reporters actually told the truth." And the reality is, it is best to view Fox as a business. You know, Fox makes sense when you view it as a profit machine, when you view it as a bank. It makes less sense when you view it as a news outlet, because, most of what it does is not news. Most of what it does is opinion and propaganda. But there is a little bit of news. There's news in there too. So it's like complicated, and that's what I think it makes it interesting. And that's why Fox drives its critics, kind of wild, and that's why there's all this debate about Fox, because it's multiple things at one. And she gets into that in the column about how why the Dominion trial is this moment of accountability for the lies, for the big lie for 2020. And that's why I think people are paying attention to the trial, and it starts tomorrow unless there's a settlement overnight.
And of course, this is your first book. This is your second book about the news business. The first was Top of the Morning, which became the reason people got Apple TV. I think it was one of the flagship shows on Apple TV when it launched, may have been the flagship show. And then you wrote this book, and now you have a third one coming out about Fox News, kind of a sequel to this, as I understand it. So I look forward to hearing more about it in a little bit.
Can I just say, Nicole's comment is really valuable. That is a better way to frame Fox. She says Fox is an entertainment company. And again, it's like I say, frame it as a profit engine. When you frame it as entertainment, it does make more sense, and it's easier to reckon with what it's doing. That's true.
And entertainment for some people, because others is just horrible stuff for the rest of us. And Nicole also wished us all happy Orthodox Easter. Greek Orthodox Easter is this weekend. So happy Easter. And then look, the enduring rite of spring, the American Cleaning Institute found that 78% of Americans did an annual spring cleaning last year. You didn't have to, because you moved homes, I guess, recently. So you don't have to.
We should tell people that story. I'm out here in New Jersey now. I'm out in horse country. I'm looking out the window to see if the horses are in the pasture, but they're not. So I won't bother with the view. But we bought this house in 2020, just, as a weekend house, as a vacation house. We decided to move out to the burbs full time and try it and see if we liked it. And we had picked a day in August of last year, and the move came. We were about to move, and that's when my show ended. That's when I was out at CNN. So literally the same day I left CNN, I moved out of the city, moved out to Jersey. It was great because every single part of my life changed in the same day.
Oh my God.
And if anyone listening can have that happen to them, I highly recommend it. It's kind of perfect to just, if you're going to rip all the Band-Aids off at once, that's what I did. Anyway, so that's why I can't find a print copy of the Times anymore. It's hard to find it out here, but that's why I'm glad I'm here with you, Sree.
But Brian, I've got to point this out. You're in a lovely suburban or even ex-urban home. You're in the rural area. How come you're in a bedroom? You haven't built a studio yet? Is that why?
I can't. I know. I don't, because my kids took over the entire house. Like the formal room became the Barbie room for my daughter's, Barbie house, and I've prioritized toys over adult space because they're only 3 and 5. So
that's so wonderful.
I will gradually get the house back over time. What I did, I'll show you what I did for CNN for the pandemic, because we were out here like on Saturdays and stuff. Like the weekend Trump had COVID, I was out here broadcasting. I always went into work for. I always was in the studio for my show. Even in March 2020, we always were in studio. We weren't doing it from home. But for live shots on other people's shows, I was in the closet. So I took over this corner of the closet that's now actually back to being a closet. And I would just, and it worked fine. It worked well enough. And the closet's great because you get padding. So there's natural soundproofing. So that's where we did our hits. Here's one of the pastures, but the horses aren't out right now. They are not our horses. We have a wonderful woman who boards her horses here at the farm. And so we get the benefit of seeing the horses without me having to learn how to clean up after them.
And at what age can children learn to ride a horse or a pony?
Sunny did jump on once and tried it out, and she's almost 6. I think it's definitely, it definitely happens younger in other families, but we're still novices.
What even is a work day anymore is the New York Times Magazine cover. This to me feels almost like New Yorker style cartooning on the front cover. And so I look forward to diving into this with you later on the show. And the book review cover is TikTok, not that TikTok. In saving time, discovering a life beyond the clock, Jenny Odell urges readers to revise their view of time and create a better future. Well, that's certainly honorable. And the review is by Tatiana Schlag. Look forward to reading this and going through this. And there's Sittenfeld's new novel and a history of humanism and spoken word poetry. Let's get to the front page with Brian Stelter. Folks, tag your friends, tell them we're live right now, but they can watch us later. And wherever you are in the world, please tell us what you're doing. How's your Sunday going? Just tell me when you look at the front page, which you haven't looked at, print edition today, Brian. What does it evoke in you to see this print paper?
Well, number one, that it's all about people, right? Both the photos, but also the articles, but especially the photos, our faces, our people, right? And that's what we need from the media to make it not about nameless, governments or bureaucrats or policies, but the people that are affected by it all. So, I like that as a overarching kind of image of the front page.
Mary C. Curtis is watching. She's a friend of the show, former guest on Reliable Sources and a roll call columnist. And she's a Slate podcaster. So thank you so much, Mary, for watching. And I know you enjoyed being on with Brian, and we loved having you here with us. The lead stories: leaked intel altered little in strategies. Ukraine sees a chance to increase support. Some people had thought this would be a problem with that leak, but this is how, that in that instant analysis, people are often wrong about what happens. So I look forward to reading that story. And you, by the way, if any of these bylines jump out at you, feel free to jump in and give us your thoughts. The generals' feud set off battles around Sudan. Democracy hopes fail. Control unclear. Declan Walsh is reporting from Nairobi. He's been in a lot of war zones. And important story. You don't often see a story like that just on the off lead right here, right? So
right.
It's interesting. And taking a fresh look at the ABCs of reading, a revolt over how children are taught to read is sweeping classrooms, school boards, and state houses around the country. I've, of course, heard about all the textbook and the revision of history and that awful stuff, but this seems a different thing. Are you folks experiencing it with your kids yet?
I don't think I am, but I want to read the story.
Okay, we'll get to the story when we go inside. A beauty treatment promised to zap fat. It left some disfigured. Cool sculpting came with a vaunted scientific pedigree. I've been on complaining about this thing. There's no way this was real, but it came from a lab at Harvard Medical School's primary teaching hospital, and everybody talked about that in the reporting, Brian. And that's how now there's a problem. And we have to remember that history is filled with examples of sainted institutions that have made the wrong call, including, by the way, as you know, Harvard Medical School was paid by the sugar industry to focus on fat rather than sugar as the problem of America. And what's the result? All the obesity problems that we see. So just because it's a great institution doesn't mean we shouldn't be skeptical and careful. How about this story? Sticky fingers, 327 shoplifters, 6,000 arrests. Jose Filippo works at a Bronx store where he says shoplifters covet baby formula and cleaning items. There are so many stores now where they just expect the robbers to come in, grab stuff, and leave. They don't even have. They just grab. They don't even have to smash and grab anymore. And this is one of the problems we're seeing in New York City. And how transgender issues became a new rallying cry for the right. A protest in Texas against anti-transgender legislation. I'd like your take on this, Brian. I was at lunch with some friends yesterday, and one of them called J.K. Rowling contentious, and I called her toxic. And this friend of mine said, "No, she's just contentious. She's not toxic." And I got more and more mad as I thought about it. That these people with great platforms are now embracing things that were said quietly. I mean, not just in this topic, but as you know, so many.
So that story is by Adam McGorney and Jeremy Peters. I love them both. I'm big fans. It's a very New York Timesy story, meaning there's been something going on, bubbling up out of the, kind of the right-wing swamp. and all the way up to Fox and into the mouths of politicians. And now, they're taking that months long, kind of year long, and like looking back at it in a very Sunday way. And it's like when I was there at the paper, we would think about what is a Sunday front page story versus a weekday front page story. That piece is very much a Sunday story. It's a sweeping look at what the heck happened in the last year or so. And as they say, the effort to restrict transgender rights has supplanted same-sex marriage as the animating issue for social conservatives at a pace that has stunned political leaders. That's the nut graph.
Yes.
And they're right. And, I would say there's a part of me that says that you could argue the story's late, but the Times has been covering this as it's been happening. So the story's not late. They're taking a sweeping view of it for Sunday. And I actually think you go back to page 1, think about the pairing of those two stories on the bottom. You've got a story about what animates the Republican Party right now, which is anti-trans messaging and anti-trans policies. And then you have a story about shoplifting. And obviously that's a crime. But if you look at the caption there, what are people stealing from his bodega? Baby formula and cleaning items. Now, I'm sure some people who steal baby formula are reselling it and they don't need it. But there are obviously other people who are in grave distress when you steal baby formula. And we can see it. We see it in New York and elsewhere. We see stuff getting locked up at CVS and Walgreens. We all know. We all feel it in various ways. We all feel the scourge of inequality in various ways. And what is the Republican Party more interested in talking about? Transgender issues, right? To me, the period of those two stories is really interesting because there's so little policy energy or attention right now around poverty, around low-income households, around the insanely high cost of housing that's crushing tens of millions of people every single day, around to the point where people are having to steal baby formula. And yet, what's the GOP talking about? What's Fox talking about? It's usually CRT or ESG or anti-trans messaging. So, to me, that's a really interesting kind of pairing of those two stories.
And Nicole says anti-trans hysteria is just this year's caravan of immigrants. And that's a story, of course, Brian has talked a lot about. Let's see a headline from history. Greta Garbo, 84, screen icon who fled her stardom, dies. This was in April 16th, 1990. The quote of the day is something else. This is not the election to open the gates of hell. It is the election to close the gates of hell. Soli Özil, an international relations lecturer in Istanbul, about the May 14th presidential and parliamentary elections in Turkey. So that's going to be a big deal. And I've come to the right person to talk about Disney Plus, 4 titles to stream right now. I don't know if you've seen these titles, but what are the 4 things that are being watched in the Stelter household? 4 or 20 things. I know these are all very popular. Andor, Black Panther, Ratatouille, and Tron. I was thinking of getting Disney Plus just for Andor, but I did not.
Oh, my kids are not old enough yet. We watch Bluey and Spidey on Disney Plus. Unfortunately, my kids are way too into YouTube, and I'm always trying to push them toward higher quality stuff on Disney Plus and Netflix, but they just want to watch like other fellow kids playing on YouTube, right? Because that's more relatable, I guess, to them.
Sure.
But I over time, I will graduate them into the higher quality.
This is the question I ask parents, like what age is it? Do you show them the Star Wars?
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
I think they'll ask for. I think they'll like. I think my kids vaguely know Star Wars, and so they'll want it, as they get older. We just saw our first movie ever as a family. The kids had never been to a movie theater, partly because of the pandemic, but really more it was just because they didn't have the attention span. Like they didn't, they're used to videos every 2 minutes, right? But we went to see the Mario movie and they loved it, and we went to see the Mario movie a second time and they loved it again. So that was a big breakthrough. I wish I was Comcast right now. They are making incredible amounts with Mario. And
the important question: butter or no butter?
On what?
In the popcorn.
In the there was too much butter. Yeah, too much butter.
Oh, but I remember taking our kids. I think the first movie we took them to was March of the Penguins, and they loved it. And we divided and conquered at our house. My wife took them to all the cartoons and eventually all the Avengers and everything else, and I did other things with them. So I think over time we also probably saved a ton of money because those tickets are $25 in
Right.
Manhattan. Yeah, and there's a nice newish section in the Sunday paper. It's called In Times Past, exploring an artifact from the archives of the New York Times. And there were these items that would run on the bottom of the front page, and it's by David Dunlap, who's a curator of the museum at the Times. And we've talked to him about being on the show or even doing a read along from the floor of the museum at headquarters. So that'll be lots of fun. We've got lots of comments coming in, folks. Let me read a couple of them to you as we go into the international section. Neil says, we watched the Star Wars series with Emily during the pandemic. She was 7 or 8. All right. And Pradnya says, I cannot watch Ratatouille. Rats near food, even cartoon ones, make me want to throw up or make me sick. And have the kids seen Ratatouille yet? No. Okay.
Not yet.
A monastery where calm is not a given, even at Easter. In Jerusalem, rival monks vying to control Christianity's holiest site struggled to turn the other cheek. Oh, they had some fun with this headline, you can clearly tell. And this is again about people, and I liked how you were pointing that out. A panda's homecoming will be long overdue, worried activists say. Yaya will soon be returning to China from the Memphis Zoo. And this is an unusual thing. The American Australian Association. Thank you, Ambassadors Kennedy and Sinados. So I'm not surprised there is one. Death toll from Russian attack on Orthodox Good Friday climbs to 11, including 2 teenagers were shot. Just awful. Do you think we're getting enough coverage of Ukraine and what's happening? Obviously, in the Times they have it, but in kind of public awareness, Brian.
Right. I think the problem with our everything, all of the above media environment is that if you want it, it is there. There is so you can read all the Ukrainian papers and websites yourself, but you have to go looking for it. Right.
Mm. And here's more. Turkish opposition leader positions himself as Erdogan's polar opposite, and that's what we're going to see if the kind of that rightward tilt of Turkey will continue. And how about this? A 21-year-old with limited responsibilities and a lot of access. And some people point out this is the young man who was only 21 and was able to access so many documents. The military does let young men and women go out and kill and be killed. So they're talking about responsibility is an interesting thing.
Right.
I don't know this story. A media backlash in Poland set off by a suicide. Boy publicly identified as abuse victim is seen as casualty of political war. Look, no surprise, fueled by the right. What a interesting story. I've not read this, so I don't know what exactly is happening here. Mother and an opposition lawmaker at a protest in Warsaw in 2020. Blast forces Japan leader to evacuate site of speech. And more stories about Sudan. And the national section, 10 years after bombing, wrestling with betrayal. And this is the bombing in Boston. And my trust in other people was shattered, and I couldn't trust myself for allowing a sociopath to get so close.
That's Yusuf, one of the friends of I forget if it was the younger. I think it was the younger. It was the younger of the 2 brothers, and he's also in the new Netflix series about the bombing, which I watched last night. You ever have that situation where you plan to watch 1 hour, but you end up watching the whole thing? That's what we did last night. It's like a 3-hour documentary series about the Boston Marathon bombing, and it was excellent. So anybody looking for something to watch today, I'd recommend it.
And is it you've executive produced a very successful TV show on Apple TV. I'm not sure how to describe what's a documentary versus kind of acting version of a real story. How do you differentiate? What are the industry terms for those 2 kinds? I really like the acting versions, if you know what I mean.
Well, dramas, right? Almost most dramas these days, right, are at least inspired by the real world, and they buy the rights to books and things like that to get inspiration. What I found interesting about the Boston Marathon documentary, and I'm seeing this in more and more documentaries on Netflix, and is they use those techniques from dramas, right? So they use the recreations. They have those scenes that are they look like a drama movie, but they're in the middle of a documentary. And I don't know how I feel about it. Like, I didn't love the way that Netflix, the way it worked in the bombing documentary, I thought the weakest part were the recreation scenes. But clearly filmmakers see a value in that, in inserting those. You don't see those like in a CNN documentary necessarily, but you see them on a Netflix documentary.
I loved, for example, the Unabomber drama that was on, right? I think it was Manhunter or something like that. I thought they did that really well with the Sam Worthington character.
Wow.
It's rock science. Fifth grader spots error in textbook. Liam Squires, 10, said he realized 2 rocks were misplaced in a textbook diagram after he learned about rock cycle. That's an unusual story. I'm sure that did really well online. And plugging in has become a key climate solution, but there are obstacles. As office market creators, support for plan to remake Penn Station withers. I did like the new part of the new Penn Station. It was very impressive. If you've been down there, it's all white and looks really good. Here's all the cool sculpting. And this strikes me, you saw the Jewel having to be fined $400 million. You're seeing this. So many things in life, Brian, we know they're bad when we hear about them the first time, but they still, they become part of the zeitgeist, and then people suffer, as you can see here. So many things like that.
Right.
Let's see here. Kids can't read and the education establishment faces a revolt. This was the story on the front page. It's a Kareem Weaver of the NAACP in Oakland, California, frames literacy as a civil rights issue. Jenny McGee, a former teacher, tried to help her son James and came to believe the curriculum was a central problem. So this is, again, not about the civil rights and civic history and all of that. This is some other portion about reading and how children are dealing with phonetics and how proficient they are in decoding words. So interesting. Virginia's Youngkin puts potential 2024 campaign on hold. Do you want to make any predictions about what you see on as you go into the 2024 election, Brian?
I do not.
Okay. Thieves in Philadelphia stole $200,000 in dimes. I'd want to know how much that weighs. My God. And eyeing 24, Tim Scott is planning to run as well. One-time model is sentenced for January 6th attack. And I love reading the obits. Did you get to write many obits?
No, only a few.
Do you remember one or two that stand out?
At CNN, I wrote Anthony Bourdain's obit, and it stands out to me because it's the most read article I've ever written anywhere in my life, and it's a strange feeling, right? Because I don't want to be proud of that, right? Like, you don't want the most read thing you've ever written to be an obituary, but then again, maybe you do. Maybe that's something maybe that can be positive. There it is. The reason why because he was a CNN star, we broke the news of his death. So, Jeff Zucker woke me up at like 4:35 in the morning, told me to come to the office, would not tell me why, just told me to come to the office. And my wife was already at work. So I took Sunny, who was like 1 year old. I put her in the stroller. We walked over to the office. Thankfully, I could walk to work at 5 in the morning. So I've got me and my 1 year old who's sleeping in the stroller. And Jeff says, Anthony died. He killed himself. We're going to break the news. We have to get ready to break the news. And so I had about an hour to write the obit. And obviously, this is an updated version that got much longer and better as the hours went on. But I had about 1 hour to write the obit, go get a black suit, get dressed, and take care of Sunny. And we wanted to. This sounds terrible, Sree, but it's true. We wanted to break the news before somebody else did. We didn't want TMZ or somebody to break the news about our family member, right? So we went with it at 7:15 a.m. That's not obit writing like the New York Times does, where they've got days or weeks to process someone's whole life, right?
Years sometimes.
Had that time with Anthony.
Yeah, they do. They can take years to write them, and sometimes the writer dies before the person of the obituary dies.
Right.
Right.
But it really is a service what the Times does with the obits, because there's no other outlet doing it to that degree, to put an entire life in context like that.
I love reading those obits, and then I even like reading these paid obits because sometimes in there's, I mean, obviously everyone's life is important, but sometimes they take extra effort and craft it in this beautiful way that the family sometimes do, and you catch unusual things. One of the things we always say is that Jordan said allegedly that Republicans buy sneakers too. Well, Harvey Arton says it turns out Jordan was an activist after all. He was often criticized for using his worldwide fame, for not using his worldwide fame for social causes, but he blazed a business minded trail as the principal owner of the Charlotte Hornets, and his transcendent success helped lay the groundwork for activist athletes like LeBron James. So I'm sure some people will need to read this to agree that this is the case because some people are still mad at him, as you know. And this is the Boston Marathon. So it's a sports story, but it's a life story and it's a terrorism story, all wrapped up. The best franchise to never win a championship tries again. And which one is that? Is that the Denver Nuggets, I guess, is the best team that has never won a championship. And everyone wants to fix soccer. No one agrees how. Is this international soccer? I haven't read this, so I don't know. Is it international soccer or American soccer? What is the problem? I thought the World Cup was a huge success, so I'm not sure what this is. So I want to take a break from the paper and talk to Brian about his new life and his new work. He says that he embraces the term, what happened to him at CNN. So I'm going to turn off my camera there and just hear from him a little bit about his story, what it's been like since he was let go or fired, as he now says, and what are you up to, and what was it like? Some of you know that I was let go very prominently at the Met. They didn't use the word fire; it was layoffs. But I just, it was the worst moment of my life. But I got a global digital hug as people all over came through and came together for me. So I've always appreciated that. And you've been missing from our airwaves. By the way, the NewsHour did an 8-minute segment on me, which is an eternity, as you know. But look at this guy talking about losing his job. I gave people a Google form, and 1,400 people filled it in to tell me what to do next. Some really good ideas and some lovingly terrible ideas, Brian. But it was something that I'll never forget. And people still call me asking for advice. I tell people on a scale of 1 to 10, what I did was a 20. Nobody should do that, but most people do a 2, which is not tell anyone. So I tell people go for a 6 if you can.
Well, and I was lucky because I was able to sign off on CNN. So I guess that's also a 20, right? And, that's one of the reasons why I'm so content. It's one of the reasons why I still love everybody at CNN. I still watch every day. Is because I was able to end the show on what I thought was a high note, so that was a positive for me. The way I view it is everybody in television gets canceled eventually. Every show gets canceled eventually, except maybe Meet the Press. But then every host of Meet the Press gets canceled eventually. So there is there's a life and an end to all of these things. And for me, I felt like I had said what I felt like I had finished something, even though it was ended for me. I felt like I had finished something. So I was lucky to be able to sign off on the air. And like I said, I had just relocated my family. Like we had just moved out to the burbs. My daughter was about to start elementary school in 2 weeks. Everything in my life was up, was all up in the air. So it was kind of a beautiful moment to reset and be a stay-at-home dad, which, I was the guy, so that Bourdain example that I was telling you about, we always used to have a nanny get to our house at like 6 a.m. because I never knew what day I'd be on the morning show. And I'd have to rush into Hudson Yards or Columbus Circle and be on TV. And so we had a life that was like, a lot of childcare, a lot of unpredictability. And then all of a sudden I had this like stability, certainty, I'm going to take the kids to school. I'm going to get them ready. I'm going to put them to bed at night. It was a gift in disguise is what it was.
And very few people get to say goodbye on the air. This is a trope. Totally. Yeah, the way television works is especially local news, you've seen this, where somebody moves to a rival network, they don't even say goodbye because they're just cut off and taken away. Totally. So I was impressed that they let, I saw some of the stories saying they're letting him do this. What is he going to say? But you were nothing but gracious And
I was actually part of the fun part is like waiting, like, the people were wondering, there was, literally the method, Chris Licht, who, I've known for a long time, is the head of CNN. He said, say whatever you want, book whoever you want. So that's why we booked the first guest on the first show 30 years ago was the last guest on the last show. Like there was some, we had, Carl Bernstein, we had some fun with it, even though it was disappointing to have the show end and disappointing for the producers to be out. Thankfully they are, they're doing well. I'm doing well. So it was a strange, like it was a really, it was such an intense, wild few days to go through. But then, I got to go home to my kids and get them ready for school. So there was a joy to it also.
When I lost my job, I was in shorts one day at home, and the family said, "Don't you have anything to do?" Like, how some people say, unlike us, they say he's going to spend more time with the family. She's going to spend more time with the family. No one ever asks the family or interviews the family. You want this person at home, right?
Touche. Thankfully, my kids are so young that they still want me to like take them every amusement park and playground. You're making me think about like maybe this was true for you too. Until I was pushed off the treadmill, I never would have thought about getting off, right? Like when I renewed at CNN, my most recent deal, I didn't really think about whether I wanted to keep doing what I was doing. Deep down inside, I was probably feeling a little, not bored, but like it was getting a little too easy. Some of you watching, you've probably had a job like that where it was like, it was great, but maybe a little too easy. You're getting a little too good at it. You needed a new challenge. But I never would have thought to get off the treadmill. I have been doing it for 20 years. I've been blogging, and then I was at the New York Times and then CNN, not, without a real break for 20 years. And, we even delayed my honeymoon so that I wasn't off on a certain Sunday on CNN. So like getting pushed off the treadmill was what was necessary in a way, right, Sree? Because like I now think about the news differently. I now consume news differently. I now think about it. I now think about how the news cycle works differently. It's been really good for my brain in that way.
Yeah, look at Tim Sohn's wonderful comment. That's so awesome. You get to be a stay-at-home dad. I was one for 6 years, the best years. And my wife is chiming in. We loved it, really. She's covering her bases there. And it's, I don't think anyone is ready for this moment because we're all taught about that kind of American work ethic, as you know, including going to work sick, right? People would power through. They'd point to you, look at him, he's come in even though he has a cold. And one of the things we learned from the pandemic, please stay home if you're sick. It's a sign of strength. And it was like even the way Americans deal with the masking versus everybody else. In Japan, they wear the mask, where I was born, by the way. They wear a mask in order to keep you safe, the other person safe. Whereas here, it's just such an interesting approach to all of this. And I think that's certainly important. So tell me, what after you kind of found your balance again, what are you up to? What are you going to be doing? I've read a little bit, but I want to hear it from you.
Well, some of the best advice I've been given in the last 7-8 months was like take as much time as you possibly can. Like however slow you're moving, move slower. Now that comes from a place of privilege, of course, to be able to afford that, and that won't last forever. But to the extent that I can just take my time and not rush into anything. That's what I've been trying to do. So you mentioned the morning show, which is on Apple TV Plus. So because I'm still a producer of the morning show, I have other, income streams, at least for now, so that I don't have to be as in a hurry. But and by the way, season 3, we finished shooting. I say we, I had almost nothing to do with it. All I do is I look at the scripts. I help the writers when they want help. I set up meetings for them with actual morning TV anchors so they can hear what it's like for people like Savannah Guthrie. But that's I'm just a producer. But season 3 is done, and it'll come out, I think, later this year. I can't say for the exact date, but coming soon. But anyway, what I'm doing now in my post CNN life is a couple of things. I'm at the Harvard Shorenstein Center, part of Harvard Kennedy School, as a fellow. Nancy Gibbs and her team have been wonderful, giving me a chance to talk with students and hold events there. And so I'm doing a lot of that. And then, I've started writing for various places. I know this is what I'm about to describe is just called freelancing, but I like to call it writing for all the places that I've loved and grown up reading. Like, there's so many places on my bucket list, like the Atlantic and Fortune and Esquire that I've been able to write for in the last few months. I have a couple more places that I haven't been able to hook yet, and I'll keep those to myself. But like, I want to try to get bylines at all these magazines and websites that I love. So that's what I've been doing, because I've started to feel the itch a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. And really, what I've been most feeling it about is the Fox trial. So the Fox trial starts tomorrow in Delaware. That's the first time I've really missed being in the daily mix. So I've been writing for Vanity Fair about the trial. I have a weekly column and a weekly podcast for Vanity Fair, and we're going to do that until there's a verdict. So if there's a settlement tonight, the podcast is over. But if there's actually a trial, which I think there probably will be, we're going to go for the duration of the trial.
Okay, you're like the Dominic Dunn of the OJ trial. You're doing that here for the Fox trial for Vanity Fair, right?
I'm afraid of that analogy because I can't live up to it. But I'm glad you said it.
Yeah.
There's going to be so much coverage of the trial, and I'm not, planning on being there every day and doing it every day. Folks like Charlotte Klein at Vanity Fair, David Folkenflik at NPR, Wemple at the Post, Marshall Cohen and Oliver Darcy at CNN. Like, I'm going to be relying on them to know what's happening minute by minute in the trial. But I do want to come in every week and try to give my analysis, because, one of the like strange benefits I have or advantages is having been inside a TV newsroom. Most people that cover TV have never been on TV, like have never been inside a TV network. And there is real value in that. And like in the first column I wrote for Vanity Fair this week about the trial, I wrote about what I was taught, what I learned when I joined CNN. I had no idea how to anchor a newscast. So I basically went through a boot camp. And I would sit in front of the teleprompter and I practice and practice and practice. And one of the first things that was said to me by one of the producers, one of the executives, one of the first points that was made was, if you're talking to a guest and they say something crazy, they say something ludicrous, or they say something outlandish, or they say something that sounds accusatory, right? Especially toward a person or a place. If it sounds defamatory, you need to jump in. You need to interrupt. And all you have to do is say, huh, what? But jump in, interject, make sure that, you're on the record, distancing yourself. Ask a follow-up. Say, what do you mean? How do you know that? What's your evidence? Say something that makes clear that you are not agreeing with what that nutty thing was just said. Now, listen, there's times on CNN that I failed to do that. There was one very embarrassing time where my producer was talking to me in my ear, and I had a guest making a Hitler comparison. And, when I found out about it, I was embarrassed. It was bad. But for the most part, that idea of interrupt when a guest says something outlandish, it's meant to protect you and the company in case of a defamation lawsuit. It is literally designed. You do that to avoid being Fox in the Dominion trial. So I tell you all that because when you watch Maria Bartiromo and Lou Dobbs, when you look at these segments that Dominion says are defamatory, you'll notice what they don't do. They don't interrupt. They don't act shocked. They don't say, what are you what? They don't interject. What they do is they sit there and they listen very politely for very long periods of time. And then they say, oh, please tell me more. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that's basically what they do. Now, technically, they ask for evidence sometimes. Yes, technically, Maria Bartiromo said to Sidney Powell, where's the evidence? When will the evidence come out? But she was just sitting there and just give me more, give me more. So anyway, that is the kind of thing that for me, it was a benefit to be inside a TV operation, to learn that lesson. And now I can talk about that and share that as this trial goes on.
Folks,
did I say anything outlandish? I hope not.
Not yet. Not yet. But you know what she was saying? Tell me more. Where's the evidence? She meant like this. Where's the evidence?
Exactly. Exactly. And that actually is one of Fox's defenses.
Yeah.
And I think what they're going to argue in court, which is she believed it. She actually believed the big lie. She believed the voter fraud lie. She thought Trump was the rightful winner and was going to stay in power. And she couldn't possibly believe that Biden won, which is, by the way, so unjournalistic to be so closed-minded that she can't imagine. There's even a text where she sent to a friend on November 20th. She says, I know there was fraud. Nothing can convince me otherwise, which means that her mind was closed, right?
Yep,
But
absolutely.
anyway, I digress.
No, this is so cool to hear that. I can give you an example. I was in the audience where somebody said that they were 100% convinced about that it was a lab leak in Wuhan, and that's his opinion. But I said, you don't mean deliberate lab leak. And he said, yes, 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 not deliberate. I mean it was a leak. So that's where people can get caught up in their own thing and not realize what they're saying. It'll be interpreted in the worst possible way. Whatever you do, no matter how innocent, will be interpreted in the worst possible way. We have a couple of comments that I want to respond to. Apollo says they didn't give Tiffany Cross a sign off. She was fired, canceled before her next episode. We've seen that happen with some folks. Marilyn says, so hard to break the American work psyche and cycle of just pushing hard. And Pradnya says, thank you, Brian, for acknowledging the privilege of taking things slow. Not everybody can afford to do that. Families can't afford it. And by you pointing that out, that's really, really important. And we're getting a lot of comments coming in, folks. We do this every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. We've been reading the paper for 7.5 years, and it's taken us this long to get Brian because he had a much better, much bigger, busy thing to do every Sunday morning. Now he's available, and we're so grateful to him. Please tag your friends. Tell them that Brian Stelter is on the air on a Sunday right now with us. But we do this with interesting guests from all over the world, and we've also read with the Washington Post and the Toronto Globe and Mail and the Chicago Daily News, and we want to do more. So get in touch with us, and we would not be able to do this without our friends at Muckrack, and of course Brian knows them very well. Muckrack is an amazing platform for anyone interested in communications, whether on the journalism side or on the PR side. So big thank you to our friends at Muckrack for sponsoring this show, and we would love to get more sponsors, as does everybody. Everybody wants more sponsors, but please email us, Sree@digimentors.group or Neil@digimentors.group, and we're also always looking for speakers and guests who are willing to get up on a Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern and be with us like Brian. So Brian, tell us about the new book, and then we'll go to the rest of the paper.
So I announced this on Thursday that I'm doing a book called Network of Lies, which is I think of it not as a sequel to Hoax exactly, but it's a continuation of the story. It's when I wrote Hoax, which was about Trump and Fox in the Trump years, it came out in August of 2020. So we didn't know who was going to win the presidential election, and we didn't know Trump was going to try to hold power, even though he had lost. And so to me, I want to do this, start this new book right there, right. September of 2020, we're on the precipice of an election. What did Fox do? What did it not do? And the reason why that I felt so compelled to write this book is because there are hundreds of thousands of pages of discovery from the Dominion lawsuit, and some of the headlines everyone's seen, right? Tucker Carlson says Trump's a demonic force, and Rupert Murdoch says let's make Trump a non-person after January 6th. We've heard the kind of the top level from those documents, but there's so much more in those documents about how it worked inside Fox, what went wrong, that I really want to piece it together in a narrative that no one's done. I don't want to dare compare it to the January 6th report, but the January 6th report does a very good job of presenting a coherent narrative of those days, weeks, and months. I want to do a version of that for what it was like in the right-wing media in the end of 2020 and early 2021, but also then take it up to now, cover, what's going to happen in the trial and what's going to happen in the primaries. Because, Fox is still the beating heart of the Republican Party and will have an outsized influence on who the nominee is and what kind of party exists in 2024. So that's what the book will be about.
David K. Johnston, who has been watching for all this time, asks, please critique Howard Kurtz's show. Ignore the Dominion voting restrictions, but do critique his choice of guests, his questions, and contrast to your former CNN show and his former CNN show. I remember when Howie Kurtz was a real journalist, as an alum of Columbia Journalism School, and I was on Reliable Sources, and it was all straight news.
David, I kind of want to dodge the question. I don't want to criticize, the guy that was on across from me directly. Maybe that makes me a wimpy. But the reality was when I was on CNN at 11 a.m., I wasn't watching what Fox was doing at 11 a.m. So that was always my out. was that I literally never watched the competing show. The truth is, I don't really have the TV on at 11 a.m. now on Sundays either. So I can't say that I know a lot about what happens on Fox on their media show. But here's what I would say that I think gets to the heart of it. Before Trump's election in 2016, Howie and I would sometimes have the same guests. We would be seeking guests from the same pool, right? So, like, for example, Molly Hemingway is the best example of this. I loved having Molly Hemingway on Reliable Sources. She was coming at this from she was a conservative media critic who I thought was rooted in reality, who would give reasonable assessments of the media from the right. And, some weeks she'd be on Howie's show and some weeks she'd be on mine, and I would compete to get her. And then after Trump's election, Molly was on again with me, and she delivered a very searing critique of the press's failures. And I was glad to have her on. But very quickly, within a matter of months, it was as if something broke in our country, right? And we all know it. We were all there. We all felt it. This break away from a shared reality. Trump, it is Trump's fault. Let's just be clear, right? He's the one that said fake news and enemy of the people. He's the one that tried to turn the public against the press and tried to say, I only watch, only read, but I approve. That was what Trump did, not what the press did. So what I noticed was all of it, very, very quickly, it was two different pools of guests, right? And Molly ended up signing with Fox, so there was no way to book her anymore. But it was as if there's not really that sense of the shared reality is what went away. And I think that when I think about the Fox show versus the CNN show, that's what I think about. They were almost in two different realities. And so maybe that makes them hard to compare and contrast. I don't know. Maybe that's a cop out of an answer, but it's the truth. I mean, I really, what is it now? 2023?
Yeah.
I feel like we are still grappling with the consequences of what happened in 2016.
Here's Debbie's comment. Says, yours was my favorite weekend show after Sree and Neil's read-along. So thank you, Debbie. That's very kind. And Patricia asks if you have a favorite section of the New York Times as we go into the sections. So do you have one that you love?
I can't, it's like picking a favorite child. Seems so unfair.
Because we want to remind people you were there for multiple years and you were the subject.
I think I got to go with the business section because I was primarily with the business section. I wrote a lot for arts and culture for the culture section as well. But, I was first and foremost the business section. So I got to represent business. I'll say Biz Day.
Sudha, Neil's mom, says, Brian, you're a devoted journalist. And Pradnya points out that they're proud Muckrack users at her organization. And so we're glad to hear it. So let's get to the paper. We have about a little over 20 minutes left with Brian Stelter. Everyone, tag your friends. They're just waking up on a Sunday or they're already halfway through their day. They can watch us now and watch it later. The entire show will run on all the platforms, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and on digimentors.group. And we also do this every Sunday. Please join us. Please follow me on the platforms. And of course, follow at Brian Stelter everywhere. And I'm at Sree on Twitter, at SreeNet on Instagram. All right, we're just going to go look at a couple of the other sections here. Let's look through the magazine because I find it's a fabulous piece of journalism every week, how they pull this together. And I like to say you get it free with your New York Times subscription. And Jake Silverstein and I are working on having him on the show, but we're going to do it a little different. We're going to go to his office when the magazine arrives, I think on a Thursday or Friday afternoon, and look at it and do the read along then. So stay tuned for that, folks. It'll be another great show. Your thoughts on the magazine as I start flipping through it?
I had the cover story of the magazine 10 years ago this week. And the fact that I still know that and remember that,
yes,
that is the prestige of the magazine. Like that's a testament to the magazine, to the editing, to the packaging, to the product, to the quality of it. I'll remember it 10 years later.
What was the cover?
It was an adaptation of my first book, Top of the Morning. It was, it was the Matt Lauer cover story.
Yeah.
I thought Rudenberg's piece last Sunday, the magazine cover on Murdoch, was fantastic. I haven't read this week's. It was the covers about how the work day is changing, the workforce,
yes,
right? What is in the workday? Yeah.
More, yeah. That's what it is. My brother sexually abused me. Once he's dead, do I tell his children? This is the ethicist column where they do such important work and such serious questions are asked. And I find and Professor Kwame Anthony Apaya is terrific. Letter of recommendation, dog sitting. And this is, this is, one
I'm
second.
going to interrupt you for
Is on the
just a
cover.
second.
Yeah, I see
This
that.
is his cover story.
I see it.
Waking up on the wrong side of a ratings war.
Yeah. I see that.
And my editor for that was John Kelly. He was at the New York Times Magazine at the time. He's now the boss at Puck. So he's always been into those media stories.
Yeah. The letter of
I'm really curious how the cover story in the magazine today is what's the print version? Because, the web version was very popular. It's all like video driven. The web version of that cover story, they had people film video diaries. So we'll see what it looks like in print.
Yeah. Dog sitting is recommended by Amy X. Wang. I'm a big believer in this as somebody who didn't like dogs because I was bitten twice, Brian, in India by dogs. I got those needles in the stomach in the 70s. But it's a great way to get halfway to buying a dog is to see offering anybody who'd offer their friends to let us babysit your dog. Your friends will be so indebted to you anyway, but it's a good chance for you to kind of rent a dog rather than buy a dog. And
Right.
You're a dog family?
Not yet, but we will be.
Yeah, I tell everybody, I wish I had listened to my family. They were begging me for years to get a dog, and I said no. And now, we got them when they were 12. I wish I had gotten it earlier. And Tara is the star of our lives. And she, of course, has an Instagram channel. It's Tara Beagle NYC. Tara Beagle NYC. Okay, the Wirecutter. You want to talk about Wirecutter for a second?
What is there to say? It's I go there every time I need to buy anything. Yeah.
So, and this is what I guess Consumer Reports used to be like that, and now, now there are other places doing it.
Well, and it's a testament to the brilliance of Meredith and the team at the Times that they keep adding on these different, aspects and elements of the Times to make it more of a lifestyle brand, right? And Wordle is a famous example, but so is Wirecutter, so is The Athletic, to build out the institution.
And are you a Wordler? Is that what they call it?
I haven't done it today yet, but my wife said it's really, really hard.
Oh, wow. A brief history of working overtime, I guess. This is the cartoon, how technology is changing the way we value work and what that means for jobs.
Oh, yeah, look, see, it's an essay,
yes.
But the main version on the web was like a video-driven piece. So
it's a very printy thing. You're right. It's very printy. Meet the office whisperers. I guess these are people who coax employees back to in-person work. Panic CEOs are turning to a niche group of.
That's a great business. That's a smart business.
Yeah. And you won't get blamed if it doesn't work, because they'll just blame it on the young people. The key is not to have command and control structure. That's what so many bosses get wrong. And I think bosses are forcing people back 5 days a week for all the wrong reasons. Some companies, it makes sense. It has to be 5 days. I think many places would benefit from 3 days a week. And I tell young people, if you can go to the office, please do, because that'll make a difference. Because that's where the CEO sees you, your bosses see you. But forcing every single person 5 days a week doesn't make sense, especially as people have to commute. And we've seen that. There's a whole package, as you're saying. These are probably
here's the video part.
The 24-hour workday. Yeah, people, super commuters, digital nomads, and a robot human nursing team. Here's what a day is like in the life of flexible workers. I didn't know there was such a thing. So 6 to 9 a.m., people getting ready. Is a super commuter. I guess super commuter are people who travel more than a certain distance.
Yeah. It's been defined as more than 2 hours. I think sometimes more than 3 hours. Yeah.
Ooh, that's brutal stuff. 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And
my thesis on the work stuff is that a lot of people don't mind being in the office. What they mind is the commute.
Yes.
What they mind is the friction, and I feel it now that I'm in Jersey. I get into the city various ways. Sometimes the train, sometimes I drive, sometimes I do a mix of them, like a combination Uber. I do all sorts of things. And the issue with commuting is just the friction, the not knowing that it's I don't think people, yes, there are a lot of people that never want to be in an office at all, but there's a lot of other folks who it's more about the convenience.
Here is when your boss is an app. Gig platforms are silently taking over new industries, pointing to a future in which algorithms decide who gets to work. And I was told this very early, Brian, by someone who drove not a drove a livery cab, if you know what those are, as you
Yeah.
do in New York. Those are the car, like a car service. And he said that before Uber, he had to depend on being nice to the dispatch person, and she would decide who would, and people would bring her gifts and like all these things. And the machine, he saw that as a good thing. That was 10 years ago. I wonder how he thinks now. And that's what this article is about, that the algorithm can be more fair, perhaps, but also can be unforgiving
Right.
and all of that. So, I operate as if I've already been fired. Oh my God, that's so. Of all the things, I'm just going to have Neil pull up my Substack newsletter this week. It was about Mr. Musk, and he's a terrible person who's doing terrible things, and he's very proud that he has 1,500 employees now, Brian, instead of 70, whatever it was, 3,500, 7,500. It's you can debate how big these companies should be, but what has upset me most is the lack of humanity in everything that he's doing, that you fire 3,000 people and you don't care. You don't give a damn, right? So I'm going to have him just blow that up a little bit so you can see 6 months with Elon, the boss baby, is my Substack. It's sreenet.substack.com. I hope some of you will subscribe for free. And I asked Dolly, the ChatGPT's image maker from OpenAI, to just make Elon the boss baby, and that's what you see there. And I do want to ask you about generative AI in just a second, but the fact that he was proud of firing all these people and no humanity, not paying their bills, not paying their expenses. That's what tells you he's a terrible person in the way he approaches the world. And that doesn't get nearly enough attention with all the horrible other stuff that he is doing. So I want to hear very quickly your thoughts on Musk and ChatGPT and all that stuff.
I just find the Musk situation really sad. You're here looking at a rigorously produced newspaper with thousands of reporters, hundreds of thousands of man hours going into the news, the content, gathering information from all around the world, including dangerous, harrowing places that Musk would never go, trying to compile all that into a product that millions of people will consume. And he calls it propaganda. And he tells his fans, don't read the news, read Twitter, because we'll know the real truth. And obviously what you see on Twitter is either from news outlets or it's from citizens, and much of what the rest of it is trash. And you see him replying to people, and I honestly, I think we know who Elon Musk is from his replies, who he replies to. He replies to grifters, trolls, extremists. He seems to believe them. That's the freaky, sad part to me.
Well, do you think he believes them, or he's using them like Bartiromo or these other people because he knows it'll get him attention and get him lots of money and all of that, or hope?
I don't know what's worse. I take him at his word, like that he replies and he actually believes this stuff, that he actually thinks that his troll sources are better than real, reliable newsrooms. And to me, that's
concerning. He'll just reply and just say concerning or worrisome, and just gives it's a rocket boost for these horrible ideas.
Well, and it's like if you told me the moon was about to crash into the sun, like I would say that's concerning, but I would know that that's nuts. And maybe he's aware, maybe he's in on it. I always take people like, I don't like the cynical, oh, he's doing it to get attention. Like I'd rather go at the, according to his own tweets, he is so ignorant of how the news business works, right? That he thinks NPR, all the BBC, I can't even talk about it. It's just, it's crazy. And more than crazy to me, it's sad, because he's a man with unlimited resources who can know what is real in the world, who can know what is true, he could buy the New York Times, right? And he could employ all those journalists to go out and do the reporting. But instead he just trashes what is true. And he relies on grifters to tell him what is fake. And I don't know. The journal story said it in the most it's on screen now, the most gentle, polite way possible, that he thinks of Twitter as being in competition with the news business. And look, this week NPR said, okay, if we're in competition, goodbye. Yeah. And unfortunately, I think we're going to see more and more and more of that.
Yeah. My own principle, Brian, is not to leave. You know, everybody left. People said they're going to leave.
Right.
Remember how everyone said they're going to move to Canada for when Trump was elected? I think a lot of people wanted to go to Mastodon or find something else, but a lot of people still stayed. Some are leaving. My idea is that the way we stayed after Facebook, because if you think of it as a utility, you want to fix it from the inside. I don't think you can fix it, and slowly it'll die. But I think the happiest person in the world about all this insanity from Elon has got to be Mark Zuckerberg.
Mark Zuckerberg, 100%.
We were all on his case, and now we don't even talk about him while he lost $10 billion and fired thousands of people because he went all in on the metaverse when he shouldn't have, right? Nobody was there to tell him no. Nobody's there to tell Musk no.
I like the comment from Doug about Musk destroying Twitter's value for emergency communications, because that's one of my main uses of Twitter is I have notifications on for my local weather services. You know, every severe thunderstorm warning, every forecast. It's my main way of knowing weather news, including emergency weather news. And, you know, he's limiting those automated tweets. Now, I am wondering if he's backtracked, as he has backtracked on so many other things, because the National Tsunami Warning Center said yesterday they heard from Twitter and they're trying to correct the problem. So maybe Musk is once again going to backtrack on his limiting of automated tweets that's hurting the National Weather Service and all these other government agencies. But that kind of behavior, like, hey, I'm going to buy a social network and then I'm going to make it harder to warn people about emergency, like that, it's a really incredible sort of thing, but it is in keeping with what he has been doing. I mean, here's Rose saying Musk thinks citizen journalism is better than the news from legacy organizations. That is exactly the mindset that is so disturbing to me as someone who, like, I'm someone who could only be where, you know, in the media today because I was a citizen journalist, right? Like, I grew up with the ability to, I was born out of the ability for us all to publish, right? To start a blog out of nowhere and to be taken seriously just on the work that I did. I never want to disparage citizen journalism. What I do think is a huge problem is lies and lying liars. I mean, what Elon Musk is engaging with is not a lot of the time. It's not citizen journalism, right? It's trash, it's bullshit. It's stuff that is intended to look and smell like news, but is not actually news. And that, knowing the difference between that and real news is the problem. And doesn't it feel to you, Sree, like people have given up? There was so much energy 5 years ago around disinformation and around trying to clean up the pollution on these platforms. And now we're going in the opposite direction. Now there's just like an assumption that, oh yeah, Twitter, it's going to be just full of garbage and hate.
Yeah, and because it is, by the way. And Colette says, have missed seeing Brian on CNN and so great to see him here. I thought some Republicans would form a brand new party after 2 impeachments and insurrection and the rest. Of course, that didn't happen. We have about less than 10 minutes with Brian. We want to just quickly look at the book review. It's a section that he's been featured in but has never written for. So again, we're making an appeal to anybody who wants to commission him.
I know, I got to figure out a book to review. That's right.
But there's so much that you could review.
What's in there this week?
And what is it about the book industry that you have learned that is worth sharing with people? Like, you know, you've been inside it, covered it, wrote about it, etc. Even in today's world.
You know, the reality is most books sell even fewer copies than people think. But when you can hit a double or a triple, it can make a big difference. And, you know, as books, you know, fundamentally are just a platform, right? And a way to launch conversations. And I think more and more authors see them that way. I'm talking about nonfiction, of course, not on the fiction side. But, you know, there's going to be a forever value in, you know, that form. I mean, and you know, I think it's so interesting. The last few years, we've seen a decline in ebooks and a rise in print sales again. Like, you know, it goes to show that no medium disappears as new mediums are invented and as there's new ways to consume. They're all additive. Ebooks are additive, audiobooks are additive, but a lot of people still want to own, you know, that print product forever. Yeah, what's on the list? I really want to read Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond. That was number 3 this week.
What else do you have in there that you see?
You know, Harry's still on the list, I think, right? Maybe he fell off. I thought Prince Harry was. Oh no, there he is, number 4. Of course, he's still on the list. Prince Harry's book is the biggest book of the year in terms of sales. Yeah. My wife loved it. It's over there. What else do I want to?
Well, let's look over here. By the way, Bell Hooks has a book on there, and
amazing that Daisy Jones and the Six is number 1. I mean, that's the power of streaming. That reminds me, I need to watch the rest of the season.
I don't know what that is. Can you tell us?
It's a series on Amazon Prime Video, but it's based on the book, and so the book is now enjoying that huge boost from launching on Amazon.
Wow. Well, there's something valuable about having the book. And folks, this is Brian's first book, or second book, sorry. His first, of course, was famously the book Top of the Morning, which became an Amazon series. And this is his second book, and he's working on a third. It's not quite a sequel, he told us, but he's going to be looking at everything that's been happening at Fox since.
If people have if people have ideas for who I should talk to for the new book, I'm bestelter@gmail.com.
Wow, there's his email address, folks, bestelter@gmail.com. One of the ways that Brian got everybody's attention was the day he didn't break the news about Osama bin Laden and the announcement that the President Obama's office was going to make, but he retweeted the right person. And when Brian retweeted, I guess it was Ben Rhodes or someone like that.
Yeah, Keith Urban or something.
It was real, and I went out there and said this is real, and then of course that took off. You had it.
That's when Twitter was fun.
Yeah, it really was. And then you had one of the best things I remember about Twitter. Your description where you said, this is before you joined CNN, where you said, you tweeted that when I hear CNN breaking news music, I turn to Twitter.
I forgot that I said that, but it's that. But it sounds true.
No,
because that's 100%. That and then once I was inside CNN, one of my frustrations and one of the things that I tried to improve a little bit in my own little way was to get CNN, the television feed, to get closer to what Twitter was, which was, Twitter was oftentimes ahead, right? Look, a lot of problems with Twitter. It's getting worse now, disinformation and all the rest. But oftentimes, the accurate information was also first on Twitter. And we would have these really frustrating delays to get that news onto TV. Even if it was a verified account from a government agency saying a fact, it would take 5 minutes to get on TV, which I thought was unacceptable. So oftentimes, I would email the control if it wasn't Sunday morning, I wasn't the anchor, I'd be emailing the control room, texting the anchor and saying, here's the tweet, here's the announcement, go with it. It's verified. One of the problems with what Musk is doing by taking away verification is taking away the ability to do that. When I would be live on TV and I would say, well, here is the announcement from the local agency and I would say, it's a verified account. And that became a shorthand for this is trustworthy. And unfortunately, he's taken that away. But I'm like you, Sree, I'm not giving up on Twitter. I met my wife on Twitter. Like I will always love that hell site. And if you stay on it, try to make it a little bit better.
Yeah. And Apollo is pointing out that Bell Hooks died in 2021 and is on the New York Times bestseller list. Yes. All About Love by Bell Hooks, the late feminist icon, explores the causes of a polarized society and the meaning of love. What a interesting note. We're going to take a quick break so that Brian can catch his breath. We're going to do a couple of announcements, and then Brian's going to come back, give us a pro tip and some final thoughts. So I'm going to bring Neil back on and just want to thank everybody who's been watching, all these great comments. It's been like a fire hose. We're so grateful to everybody who's watched. We do this every Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time to 10 o'clock, and then it's on, so you can watch it anytime, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So please join us. Please subscribe on any of those platforms and tag a friend right now. They'll get an alert and they can watch Brian and my conversation with him. We want to thank our sponsors.
Absolutely. And Sree, we're going to thank our sponsors. I'm going to bring on, we want to thank Muck Rack for their support, their longtime support of Sree's Sunday New York Times read along. So thank you to Muck Rack. We also want to remind folks that the show is produced by Digimentors. Digimentors is the consulting firm that Sree set up, and we do digital marketing, events, and digital programs, strategic communications, trainings, and workshops. We also help with staffing and recruiting. We also want to give a shout out to the Local Connection newsletter. The Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University brings you the Local Connection newsletter each week. It offers story ideas and pro tips for journalists Best of all, it's free. You can subscribe at bit.ly/local news tips, bit.ly/local news tips. And Sree, what an incredible show with Brian. We're so glad he was able to join us. The one good thing that came from him being fired by CNN and leaving reliable sources is that we get to have him on our show.
Yeah, and all the time he got to spend with his kids, which is really special. Marilyn says, "I'm so disappointed in today's Twitter. It was such a disruptor as Twitter during Superstorm Sandy. Marilyn was a queen of social media on Staten Island after the superstorm. She helped thousands of people understand what's going on, and that's that emergency conversation that Brian was referring to. And Doug Levy at SF Doug has written a book about how to use social media for communications. He had me do workshops at Columbia Medical School when he was there, and I was at Columbia. This is such a pity that Twitter's being ruined by Elon Musk. We are almost out of show, so let's get Brian to come back and share with us a pro tip. Rose is pointing out that Brian met his wife, the great Jamie Stelter, on Twitter.
Yeah, we're about to go to Walmart. We got some shopping to do on Sunday. But what tips do I have? What comes to my mind, because we mentioned Fox earlier. We talked about the Fox versus Dominion, the Dominion versus Fox trial that begins tomorrow. And I made a choice a couple of days ago. I decided I'm not going to go to opening arguments. I'm not going to go to Wilmington for the first week of the trial. And my reasoning, and maybe it's a mistake, my reasoning was there's going to be so many reporters there on day one. It's going to be such a packed house. There's nothing I can add value to. There's nothing I can do differently there tomorrow. There's nothing I can do better than the 50 or 60 other reporters who are going to be there. And, I guess that would be my overarching thought for everybody, which is, what can you add that no one else can add? What can you do that no one else can do? Where can you go cover this thing on the other side while everyone else is covering A? While everyone else is covering A, can you cover B or C or D or find what E or F is? And I guess, there are lots of times where I failed at that in my career. There's lots of times where I had to write, basic wire stories, 400 words of breaking news on this or that. And it was just like the Post story and just like the AP story and just like NBC story. There were lots of times where I had to write, the basic version that was just, kind of commoditized. But that's the price of entry, but the goal should be something better, something different than that. And I think especially in an AI environment where most of the internet will be written by computers, we have to figure out where we can add value. And for me, adding value means not being one of the 60 reporters of the courthouse on day one. I'll go on other days and I'll try to do something unique and original, on other days. But that, I think, would be my pro tip that you asked for. At CNN, the way I thought about it was the following. We had a 24-hour network, right? About 20 hours of live news every day. And a lot of those hours were pretty similar. The format was pretty similar, the graphics, the stories, the style. And my approach was Sunday mornings. Here we are on Sunday morning. My attitude about 11 a.m. Eastern was, let me put people on that have not been on all week. Let me put on stories that have not been on all week. Let me lead with a story that has not been led with all week. And again, sometimes I couldn't do that. And sometimes I was stuck in the same news cycle as everybody else. But thankfully, most of the time, I had the freedom and the autonomy to go a different direction and to book a different kind of guest and to try a different kind of story and to put a different banner on the bottom of the screen. I was always obsessed. I like the scroll, Neil. I was always obsessed with the banners on screen, and I always wrote them either myself or I edited them myself. Like, I wanted to be responsible at the end of the day for everything on the screen. So if there was a typo in Elon Musk's name on the CNN banner, it was my fault, not the producer's fault. But through the banners, through the guests, like doing something differently than every other hour, that should be the goal. And you don't always live up to it, but that was the goal I felt. And so that's how I feel now, in this post CNN life. It's like, what can I go do that others aren't doing? Like what? And so with the book about Fox I'm going to write, it's like, how can I put together a narrative presentation and pull out stuff in documents no one else has pulled out? That to me is exciting. That to me is the higher value order journalism. That to me is what you've read in the Times today. The stories on the front page, the stories in those features, those are not just the 500-word commoditized stuff that AI is going to do in a year or two. That's the human handcrafted work that we need journalists to do. That's different from everybody else in the pack. So that would be my, and Rose said it better than me. It's about zigzagging. It's about going, look what 40 people are doing and go the opposite way. And, that's what I'm going to try to do in my career going forward.
Wow, what a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Brian. We loved having you on the show. Thank you for sharing it with your audience. We're blowing up here. This is like our Rick Wilson show, Neil. You remember that, where
Absolutely.
we had the Rick Wilson effect, people coming out and watching who hadn't seen before. We're super grateful to you, Brian. I know you got to get to Walmart and do family stuff.
We got to buy a baseball bat for Sunny. She's starting T-ball next week.
Marilyn suggests I would name the book How Low They Go. And for those who don't know Brian's full story, he started as a college student, just writing about the things he loved. He loved watching TV, and he wrote about TV. And there he's now has grown into this incredibly accomplished journalist. And we're so proud of everything he's done. So thank you, Brian. And
thank you, Sree. Thank you, Neil.
End this here. And thanks, everybody. We'll look forward to next Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern, and of course on all the platforms right now. So goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.